Hello and welcome to my dungeon. It's finally over. Do you remember when we started back talking about in the dungeon videos about Thor's butt, my cat's butt? It has come to a finish. For context, in the past we have talked about Thor's anal glands where like for some reason they stopped working and then they would burst and then he would have a big hole in the side of his butt and he'd have to wear a cone, he'd have to get antibiotics and like there's all this stuff, right? I don't even know when this began. When did this start? Basically, I had a feeling that his anal glands were acting up again, took him to the vet, and she was like, well, you know, we could get an allergy test to see if he's allergic to something and see if that's what's causing this, because I was like, I don't know what's wrong. I feed him the right food. I feed him wet food 3 times a day. He has a water fountain that he drinks from. He's a little chunky, but he's not massively overweight, right? Like he's good. Right? None of this made sense to me. So she's like, okay, we could do an allergy test for $500. And I was like, ugh. Sent in for his allergy test results, came back that he's slightly allergic to dust, slightly allergic to bees and wasps. And I was like, all right, I don't see how that affects his anal glands. And the vet's like, yeah, it doesn't. And I was like, ugh. What's the next step? Because I don't want to bring him in, you know, every month. Thor doesn't like the vet. And they tell me, oh, you know, before bringing him to the vet, give him a gabapentin 1 hour before the vet. And I did that and it didn't work. And so they had to sedate him and that cost money. That's like a $300 vet bill and stress onto him. You know, like every single time I bring out the cat carrier, he hates life. I just didn't feel like that was a good life for him, you know, to like constantly be afraid. And so I asked the vet, can we remove his anal glands? Like, is this something that he needs? And the vet's like, well, no, they only really use it to mark their territory and he's an indoor cat, right? And I was like, yes, strictly indoor. And she was like, okay, yeah, then he doesn't need them. And I was like, okay, cool. How much is that gonna cost? Because I looked it up on Reddit and it was like, oh, mine cost $5,000. I was like, it's something I would have to look into for him because it would be an improvement on his life. His quality of life would increase tenfold, you know, like it would make him better. And so I, you know, asked the vet how much would it cost. She's like, okay, we'll email you an estimate, blah, 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 blah. I wait a couple days and I get emailed an estimate and it was like $2,600. I've had Thor for 12 years, almost. In January of 2025, it'll be 12 years. But I was like, I've had him this long. I've saved up enough. Thor has his own little savings account if anything were to happen, you know? So I have Thor's savings account. I was like, I can do this. After the allergy test, they're like, okay, so you know, to see if we can do this surgery though, is we need to get his blood drawn. So can you bring him in? And I was like, yeah, I can bring him in. And so they're like, okay, give him 1 gabapentin the night beforehand and then 1 gabapentin an hour before you bring him in. And I was like, that doesn't work, but okay. And I could tell the gabapentin didn't work. He was very, very much awake and he was very scared. And they're like, okay, yeah, sure, we'll get it real fast. I was like, no, you're not. So they took him to the back and I was sitting there and like 20 minutes passed and the girl comes out. She goes, yeah, so we were unable to get the blood. I was like, can I give him gabapentin like 2 hours before, 3 hours before, because he reacts to it. It's like peak at 3 hours. She goes, no, it's peak at 1 hour. And I was like, I'm telling you what I witnessed with him. When I give him the gabapentin the night before, he doesn't start getting until like hour 3. We came to an agreement where I'd give him 2 gabapentin pills 2 hours before, take him to the vet. And I walk in and I was like, can I come in there with y'all? And they're like, and I was like, I think he would do better if I'm in the room. And they're like, let me go ask the tech in the back. And I was like, okay. So they leave and I'm holding Thor, you know, and I'm just like, come on, man, you know, just let me be in the room. I'm not gonna squeegee at the blood. Like I'm not gonna faint, you know, he's not gonna behave unless I'm there. Like I know him. So she comes back out, she goes, yeah, okay, come on. And I was like, oh, thank God. So we go in and, you know, she's like, okay, can you get him out of the carrier? I was like, yeah. So I open the carrier. He's super loopy, by the way. So I pull him out of the carrier and they have like this burrito, like a blue burrito. And so I put him down on the burrito and it like this, like it had him as a burrito, and then it had like a hole for his back leg, you know, for them to draw the blood. Put him in the burrito and he's just kind of laying there and he's, you know, I put like I'm right here, I'm right by his head, you know. Then they pull out this little mask. It's like a reverse Bane mask because it went like it had this much and then everything else was covered. And they're like, yeah, so we put this on because cats, you know, react better if they can't see. And I was like, yeah, I understand that. He's not like that. He has to see me. But I was like, you know, he'll just, you know, it's fine. So I put my face right by his nose so he could smell that I'm here, right? And so they're like, okay, we're gonna start trying to put in the needle. And I was like, okay. So, you know, they're fiddling around. They couldn't find the vein for a little bit. And I was like, oh my God, please. Like, I don't want that. Because he was behaving. He was behaving very well. And then she's like, okay, I'm gonna put in the needle. I was like, okay. So she puts in the needle and he starts squirming. I was like, it's okay, Thor, it's okay. So I'm like, you know, talking to him, like kind of petting him through the mask or whatever. He's behaving. And so like a few seconds go by and then because there's 2 vet nurses and what are they? I don't know what they're called, but one of them goes, wow, he is doing a lot better with you in here. And I was like, I know, I try to tell y'all. And so then, you know, I guess she got like halfway through with the vial, and then he starts squirming. And I was like, oh, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. And like, you're doing so good, you're doing so good. And I, you know, put like my neck there, like my hair. And then he just started squirming, and I was like, what is he squirming? So I looked down, because I have like my body like on his upper body, so, you know, he doesn't squirm and like ruin something. I looked down, and he's trying to move the mask around because he wants to see what's going on. So I put, like, I have like my chest right here with his head, and he pushes the mask aside, and we lock eyes, and he stops moving, and they finish the blood draw. And we were just looking at each other, and I'm like, you're doing so good, you're doing so good. And he's just looking at me. And so then they, like, you know, they wrap it up or whatever, and they're like, wow, he is a completely different cat with you in here. And I was like, yeah. I was like, it's 'cause, you know, I've had him since he was a kitten, and I work from home, I always have, so he's just super used to me being around. And, you know, if I react to something, he knows he needs to react, and like if I don't react, he doesn't need to react. Like, he just, you know, goes off of me. And they're like, yeah, we're gonna put in his notes that you need to be in the room. And I was like, sounds great. So then, you know, put him back in the carrier, go home, you know, he sleeps off the gabapentin, he's, you know, blah, 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 blah. And then we had to wait for the blood results. Blood results come back, and she said that they looked good for an older cat. Like, his cholesterol's a little high, and there's, you know, he had a little bit of crystals in his urine, but not a whole lot to be concerned, which doesn't matter. I'm concerned no matter what, because I feed him a lot of wet food, and he has a lot of water, so why does he have crystals, you know? Like I said, he is a little chunky, so, but anyway, so she said he was healthy enough to go through with the surgery. So I was like, great. And so then they're like, do you want to schedule the surgery? And I was like, when are y'all good? And she goes, tomorrow. And I was like, that's a little soon. And I was like, how about the day after tomorrow? And they're like, yeah, that'll work. I was like, okay, great. Is there anything I need to know? Like, do I need to get new litter? Do I need to get like special food? Do I need it? They're like, no, you don't need to worry about that. We'll tell you it afterwards. I was like, okay. The time comes, and I'm nervous. I take him in, you know, he's on gabapentin, and like, I'm just nervous, and cause like, I don't think anything's gonna go wrong. It's not like a heart surgery, but you know, he's my little guy, and he's just scary. Go in, you know, I'm talking to one of the vet people, and they're like, you know, looking him over, making sure everything's all good. And like, okay, we'll take him to the back. You can come back in like 4 hours. And I was like, okay. They're like, are you nervous? I was like, a little bit. And like, you don't need to be nervous. We're very good at our job. I was like, it's not that. It's just, I'm just nervous. Like, it's not because of y'all. I'm just nervous. 4 hours-ish go by, and I get a call, and they're like, hey, so the surgery went great. We were able to successfully remove them. He's just waking up right now, and so, you know, you can come get him in like an hour. And I was like, that's great. Yay, hooray, thank you so much. So then, you know, I go in, and I pay for it. And then I get Thor, you know, he's quietly in his carrier. And then, you know, we get into the car, and we're walking back, and, you know, we get in the house. And the thing is, they gave me a cone to put on him, right? And they gave me all these pills. I had to give him all these pills. He had like 7 stitches in his butt, and blah, blah, blah. Put the cone on so he doesn't lick the stitches out. And I was like, okay. I told him, like, I'll have no problem getting the cone on, because Thor doesn't really mind the cone. It's kind of easy putting the cone on him. I opened the carrier, and I thought it was going to be like he was sedated like all the other times. This was Demon Thor. I don't know who this cat was, because I opened the carrier, and very sloppily, he took off. He sprinted up the stairs very clumsily, immediately ran into underneath the bed in the box spring, and immediately started suffocating himself. I don't know how he managed to do that. And I just heard, I was like, oh. So I Hulk smash, this mattress is heavy, and I just go, and I just, grunt included, threw the bed off, and then I slowly lifted the box spring to try to find him, and he was like, but his eyes were like, his eyes were so dilated, like they were just pure black, and he like, just his tongue was out, and I was like, what is happening? So I called the vet, and they didn't answer, and I was like, what do I do? Like, is this normal? Is he overheating? Like, is he sick? Like, what is happening? And then he like ran into the living room, and then he ran back into the bedroom, and then he ran into the living room, and then he laid down on his cat tower, and he's also not supposed to jump, right? He was trying to climb all of his cat trees, and I was like, Thor, please, please, please. I was like, chill, chill. And then I put like my hand by his face, and then he calmed down a little bit, and then he sprawled out a little bit, but then he took off again, and I was like, oh my God, this is horrible. I start crying, and I'm like, what is happening? So it turns out, I looked it up, cats coming out of like deep sedation. Dogs are a little goofy. Cats are terrified. They are absolutely terrified, because the thing is, they put like these drops on their eyes, and so that way their eyes are like, they don't get dried out during surgery. And so Thor, the reason why he was freaking out was because he was coming out of sedation, but he couldn't see anything. So it makes sense, whenever he smelled me, he would calm down, because he was Thor coming out of sedation. He was acting not like Thor, and it was very weird. So once I read that online, I closed all the blinds, I turned off all the lights, and I set like made the apartment like Thor proof, and I had to keep it Thor proof, and then finally was able to get the cone on him. And then after, I don't know, 2 days, he started to calm down, and I was like, oh, thank God. And then the 3rd day, I walk out, and Thor's laying on the couch, and I go over and I pet him, and I'm like, hey buddy, and then he sneezes, and I was like, all right. So I go to sleep Fourth day, you know, wake up and Thor's sleeping on the bed with me, and I'm like, nice. And then he's just sneezing and he's licking his nose a lot. And I'm like, you got allergies? You don't normally sneeze like this. I'm like, okay, I'll keep an eye on it. So I'm watching him, you know, the whole day. He's sneezing a lot. He starts sneezing even more at the end of the night. And I was like, okay, why are you sneezing so much? Like, why? And his nose was running. He was constantly licking his nose. And I was like, this is weird. So then the 5th day, I wake up and I go check on him, and he's on the couch, and he has like nestled himself into being in this little nest. And he did not get up when I walked in the room. And the thing about Thor is wherever I go, Thor goes, right? So I went and got him some food. He didn't eat the food from the night before. He hadn't really eaten much. And so I started getting concerned because he didn't get up. And I was like, okay, well, maybe he's just really sleepy. You know, maybe he's still wearing off. He's healing. You know, he had surgery. He's healing. But the sneezes and the runny nose was a little concerned. I called the vet and like, do you want to bring him in like, you know, a couple hours? I was like, that would be great. So I was like feeling him and he felt hot. And I was like, do you have a fever? And I was like, what is happening? He had no gabapentin, and this is the first time he went to the vet not shaking. And I was like, you either feel horrible right now, or because you're not on gabapentin, you don't feel as scared or anxious, because I'm 99% sure gabapentin gives Thor anxiety. I'm 99% sure. So anyway, I took him out of the carrier. He didn't fight me. The vet looked at the stitches and was like, no, it's healing nicely. And so then she like felt him. She goes, oh, I think he does have a fever. She's like, can we take his temperature? And I was like, yeah, of course. He did so well. I held him and they took his temperature and his butt, and you know, he didn't fight them. He was kind of like, but that was it. And then he did have a fever, and they're like, okay, we're gonna get antibiotics. We're gonna give him a shot of antibiotics, and then you have to give him liquid antibiotics in the mouth every day. And I was like, okay, for 2 weeks, by the way. 2 weeks of hell. They gave him the shot, and then, you know, he immediately started to perk up. Immediately. And like I gotten kitten food. I got like broth to spoon feed him. That whole time he was like sick, he wasn't feeling good, I was spoon feeding him broth. He finally started to get interested in food. So I was like, you know, trying to mix up broth and like, you know, all this other stuff. And then it was so weird because he was like sneezing it so much, and his nose was like runny. Was that like the color? Because his nose is orange. The color went to like a very pale pink, and that concerned me a lot. But the vet said that, you know, it's probably just because he kept licking it so much and it was like irritated and runny. But she checked his gums too and said his gums were super like healthy, like wet and healthy, and they didn't look pale. So he was hydrated, because that was like my bit. I was, you know, I was spoon feeding him. It's very scary. And I was like, what if I did the wrong thing? Like, what if I thought I was doing the right thing? What if I did the wrong thing? What if Thor gets sick? And what if Thor dies? You know, like what do I do then? He recovered. I gave him his antibiotics every single day for 2 weeks, and he was very happy doing that. And then it was time to get the stitches out. So they're like, all right, give him the 2 gabapentin. I was like, yeah, I know the drill. So then I took him in. I was like, can I be in the room? And they're like, I don't know. I was like, can I be in the room? And the vet's like, oh, I don't know. And then the girl from before who helped do the blood draw, she was walking past, saw me and Thor, and goes, no, she needs to be in the room. And the vet and the other vet tech like look at her, and she goes, I was there for the blood draw. She needs to be in the room. He's different when she's in the room. And they're like, oh, yeah, okay, you can be in the room. Like, it's not like I want to be there. Like, I do want to because he's my cat. But, like, I'm just telling you he does better, you know? We go into the room, take him out of the carrier. Immediately, Thor wants none of this. He wants, both of the gabapentin somehow didn't work, but he wants none of this. So he is, like, glued to my chest. I think he doesn't like male vet techs for some reason. And the guy that came in, he's like, hey, Thor. And Thor goes, I was like, oh, God. And I was like, I'm sorry. And he's like, no, it's okay. So the only dilemma is the male tech, he had to, so y'all have seen Thor's tail. It's just constant. It's constantly moving, you know? When he was trying to remove the stitches, Thor's tail was like, I was holding onto his head like this. I had his head between my titties and, you know, holding him like this. He was doing great. He was a lot, but he was doing great. The guy was like, okay, so I can't get the stitches removed because of his tail. And I was like, you've been down there for 5 minutes. Like, what do you mean you couldn't get any stitches? And so then the guy's like, I'm gonna go try to get help. And I was like, okay. So he comes back with a string and is like, no one is available, so I'm gonna have to try to hold his tail with the string. And I was like, okay. You know, we managed to get Thor onto his side, so then Thor's tail was like sideways, and he was able to get like 4 stitches out. But then we got to the stitches that were kind of like scabbed a little bit, and then luckily another vet tech was able to come in who could hold the tail. He was meowing a lot. He was growling. He was telling those vets that he was not happy. But he did good. He did real good, and I kept telling him how proud I was of him and how he was such a good boy. And you know, it's finally over. At the end of the day, it's finally over. And the vets were like, you know what, he may have, you know, problem, like he may leak a little bit of poop sometimes, you know, he may have diarrhea. And I was like, okay, I'll keep an eye on that. Like, it's okay if he, you know, poop can get cleaned, you know, like it's okay. Like, as long as he's not in pain, like if he poops on the couch can get cleaned, you know. Thor has not had any pooping problems, and his anal glands will no longer burst, but he has not had any. He poops like a grown human man. The poops have been the same, if not better. Like, I'll be walking in the kitchen, I'm like, ugh, and I'll look in the litter, and there's like a lot, perfectly healed, the sickness gone, which was really scary. I think I was more scared about the sickness because I've never seen Thor sick ever. But he recovered and he's very happy and he doesn't have to go to the vet for, another 8 months or so. He'll need to get his, shots. Yeah, but it's in a long time. Okay, that's the story of Thor and the vet. Thanks for watching. He's perfectly happy. He had his 12th birthday with his little cone around his neck. Anyway, thanks for watching the video. You guys have a fantastic day. Safe travels. Okay, bye!